Hello again, Warren here with the Peach State Prime Transformers channel, and wanted to do a little bit of a different video. Not that, I don't try to make all my videos somewhat different, but really today, 2026, in addition to it being the 40th anniversary of Transformers the movie, it's also the 30th anniversary of Beast Wars. And of course, we talked about that a little bit when in the video where I gave my thoughts on the upcoming Predacons box set coming from Hasbro Pulse and other related outlets. But wanted to do a few videos just really highlighting Beast Wars in general. Beast Wars itself, I know when it first came out, and even today, there's a lot of fans that have mixed feelings about it. They prefer the vehicles and miscellaneous objects of the Autobot Decepticon war. Whereas, of course, in Beast Wars, you had the Maximals and Predacons that, of course, all transformed into animals, looking slightly more robotic and metallic as the series went on. But arguably, Beast Wars really did bring the franchise back. We had Generation 2, which just, souped up reruns of Generation 1, which, again, Generation 1 will always be, to me, the basis of all Transformers. And of course it is. It was first. But I enjoyed Beast Wars. Beast Wars had a lot of, unique story elements to it. It really built upon itself. You had your standalone episodes, but it all really, kind of built toward a larger story. And part of the thing that really helped set those stories apart was its cast of characters. One thing it's really noted for is starting that kind of that trend or that process of having, in Transformers, of having a smaller core cast of characters. Whereas in G1, yeah, you always had Optimus, maybe Bumblebee, and then, of course, you had your core Decepticons like Starscream, Megatron, and Soundwave. But outside of that, it was very much a rotating cast. And, you did get some, development here and there. You really didn't get to stay long with a lot of the characters. Whereas Beast Wars really, had those arcs for its characters. Having having a bigger toy line, but having a smaller core cast of characters in its television show really gave you those true personalities, those real well fleshed out personalities. And with that being said, what I like to do today is share with you my top 5 Beast Wars characters. Now, I will be starting off by showing the toy of the character I'm talking about and ranking. However, this is not a toy review. You'll see I'll be showing other images, of course, from the show and all that. It's really about the character itself and why I think they stood out. My list is, I'm going to go ahead and tell you up front, my list is going to be different than yours. This is just mine personally. There's a lot of honorable mentions. Frankly, just about every character featured in Beast Wars, I'm talking about the television show now, really was, really did show growth. They're lovable characters. And, if a character's not on my list that I have here, doesn't mean I don't like the character. It's just I limited myself to 5. And, when I thought back, I even went to TF Wiki, pulled up the list of Beast Wars characters and said, okay, let me determine, just even looking at the list, who stands out at me? Who do I remember just really liking in the moment? And that's, kind of the basis for this. And with that being said, another caveat is, these are all show characters. As I mentioned, the Beast Wars toy line was pretty expansive, featuring tons and tons of non-show characters. Some of those are great as well. But, what really puts a character up and over is seeing them in that media. So, by default, my selections are all show characters. Again, not to throw any shade at the non-show characters. There are some great toys that weren't featured in the show, but again, these are all show characters. So that's enough setup. Let's go ahead and dive into the list. All right, so we're going to start with 5 and work our way up to number 1. And in my number 5 spot for Best Beast Wars character is none other than Optimus Primal. Optimus Primal, I think, was a very well fleshed out character in the show. And, again, we're just talking Beast Wars here, not Beast Machines. I think, yes, he's the namesake of, Optimus Prime. However, I love how the spin was put on his name as not just to recycle the Optimus Prime name, but they gave him that Primal second name instead of Prime. And a lot of that is, he really technically, was never pronounced a Prime in the Beast Wars television series. He did carry Optimus Prime Spark, which, of course, he became Optimal Optimus at that point. Prior to that, he had his Transmetal form. But, I just really I felt he was a very down-to-earth leader for the Maximals. Could relate to them, new business, got down to business when needed, but also, got on their level at times. The other thing, there were some nice callbacks, again, to his namesake with his famous catchphrase whenever something went wrong. He'd say, well, that's just Prime. And it just, what was an awesome callback. Certainly showed a respect for his predecessor. Well, to his namesake is a better way to say that. And just, all that he went through, fighting against the Predacons and Megatron, different alien species coming down, like the Vok, having to deal with, potential turncoats within his ranks. Just a great character and just, a great source of, optimism. But, he was a very enjoyable character to watch. And his toys were always great as well. Like I said, starting with that original toy, going to Transmetal and then Optimal Optimus, was just something that was always fun. And, I always enjoyed him as a leader, even though he did stand apart from Optimus Prime. And, his kind of, he's known for his big stature and that deep voice. Whereas Optimus Primal, you saw in the beginning of the show, him kind of being that, kind of newer to being a leader. And toward the end, he just really evolved into, just, again, not only a great character, but just a great leader. All right, number 4 is Inferno. So, the reason why I always liked Inferno is because, in short, he's just crazy. I really loved that about him. He was just a fun character. He does share the name with the G1 Autobot, Inferno, which of course was a fire truck. And this is the cool thing. Inferno in G1, again, the Autobot, was all about, designed to put out fires. Beast Wars Inferno was designed to start them, being a Predacon. He always had his, fire blaster. I forget the exact name of it, but being a fire ant, the name fit. It's one of the better reuses of a name between different eras of Transformers. And I know a lot of people don't like name sharing, but look, you have a whole planet full of robots, of Transformers, just like you do on Earth. How many people are named John, but they're not related? Or Bob, or Sue, or Sally? It's the same thing. I mean, we don't really get into last names with Transformers, but you could have Transformers with the same name and be completely different characters. But anyways, what I just, again, and I love how his characterization, when he's brought online for being a protoform, he really takes on some of the aspects of his alt mode, referring to Megatron as his queen all the time, just like ants, in a colony have a queen. It was a really fun, kind of play with that. And just, his look and demeanor, like, both in the most recent toy and on the show, you just look at his face, that big mouth, and even those, I guess, are supposed to represent additional eyes or something, but those bumps, I don't know, they even look kind of like acne to me, that this is just somebody that's just like a pyromaniac, like just like your stereotypical, like you think of somebody that just absolutely just bonkers and crazy out there. They nailed it with this persona. And he's just, again, just a fun character, an excellent Predacon, just out there to do as much destruction as he can. All right, in that number 3 spot, we have another Predacon. This one I think is probably on everybody's list. Waspinator. Waspinator is very much, has always been kind of the comic relief. He started out as, okay, he's just, he can turn into a wasp and, fly kind of fast, somewhat of a threat for the Maximals. But just, that voice work by Scott McNeil, it really personified who Waspinator became in the series. And no, he really didn't evolve that much, but again, he was the comic relief. If somebody was going to get smashed or hit or blown apart, but always rebuilt, always there in the next episode, it was Waspinator. And, his speech pattern kind of, this is a weird comparison, but kind of reminds me of the reasons why I liked G1 Grimlock. Kind of that same, referring to himself in the third person and, just, always the whipping boy, always just out there getting into trouble. He's a little crazy, but not Inferno crazy. His name, Waspinator, is nice and original, to the character. And you think of Waspinator, you only think of this character, even though he has appeared in some other media. The quote that I always think of is, "Oh, Waspinator hurts over his whole body." Again, just a true fun character and a joy whenever he was on screen. One other thing I gotta say, and, whether it was really Waspinator's doing or not, it really wasn't. Waspinator even had the pleasure of being possessed by Starscream's Spark in the episode Possession, which is actually my favorite episode of the series. And honestly, looking at what we had in Beast Wars, and then, everybody loved the Seekers in G1, that was perfect. Waspinator is very much what I'd consider to be a Beast Wars Seeker. Yes, we had Pterosaur, but I don't know, just seeing the moves that Waspinator could pull off when flying sometimes. It was actually one of his strongest suits as far as a warrior. that I'd go out on a limb and say, he's a Beast Wars seeker. And again, having Starscream possess him was just absolutely perfect. And, not that this is a spoiler. I mean, again, the show started 30 years ago. The very last episode of Beast Wars, that very last scene, Waspinator finally gets his due, and even though he's a Predacon, you kind of feel good for him, because again, all he had to endure, all the pain he had to endure over the course of the show. All right, in the number 2 spot, and I feel pretty good about this one. When I talk about character arcs in the show, this character probably had one of the best, if not the best character arc. And that is Dinobot. Dinobot here really, again, went through some stuff in the show. So Dinobot, first, his name is an excellent homage to, of course, the G1 Dinobots. Though a little on the nose, he really, at first it was kind of like, why are they naming a whole subgroup, one character? And again, this is the early days of Beast Wars when we were still understanding it all. And, he really grew into it and really defined the name. Going back to the very first episode of Beast Wars, he started out, Dinobot started out as a Predacon under Megatron's command. And, he's arguing with Megatron. He obviously, is trying to challenge him for leadership. And my very first thought, and I know we just talked about him with Waspinator, but my very first thought is, this has to be a relative of Starscream's. Because he was acting just like him, outright attacking his Megatron, wanting leadership, and just thinking he's better to do so, even going as far as to try to take over the Maximals by challenging Optimus Primal to a contest for leadership at the end of that very first episode, bleeding into the second episode. But as time would go on, I would be proven wrong. He was nothing like Starscream. And again, that just goes to the strong storytelling that we had in Beast Wars, because he became one of the most loyal Maximals on that show. Yes, he had his conflicts with especially Rat Trap and some of the other Maximals butting heads. But at the end of the day, he was always there. I mean, there were some questions about him turning back to the Predacons from time to time, but he always stayed loyal. And his biggest thing was, his honor, which I don't think I've seen a character refer to honor as much since, frankly, Star Trek with the Klingons. But his honor really made him who he was. And one of the most powerful episodes of Beast Wars was in fact Code of Hero. One of the best, well written, even the dialogue, how it was delivered in that show. And that was very much, of course, Dinobot's big episode. And again, spoiler alert, he dies at the end of that episode, which again just speaks to the maturity of Beast Wars. I mean, yeah, we had Transformers, killed off in Transformers the movie, but this was just a regular episode with no warning. He ended up dying in the end, and again, using his honor, but by upholding his honor and doing what was right. He did pay the ultimate price, but and sacrificed himself. And just seeing, again, that character arc from this Starscream-esque kind of character to then, joining the Maximals, being a turncoat, kind of like, you go back to, Skyfire in the original G1 show, yeah, he switched from Decepticon to Autobot. This was that same type of story, but on steroids. And just, the fallout from it. Because when Skyfire switched, it was never mentioned again. It was always kind of that dark past that Dinobot held with him. And again, really helped shape his path forward. And for that, I really think he deserves that number 2 spot as being one of the best Beast Wars characters ever. All right, now before I reveal my number 1 Beast Wars character of all time, do want to take a moment, acknowledge a couple honorable mentions, and by the time I get through my honorable mentions, you'll probably figure out who number 1 is. But I know a lot of people are probably going to be upset that I did not include Rhinox, Rat Trap, Tarantulas, or probably worst of all for a lot of people, Black Arachnia on my list. Those are all great characters, and I like them. And of course, I did not include Cheetor either. They all had great arcs. Rat Trap was always that whiny, kind of charismatic, almost, like middle to older brother, I guess. I don't know the better way to put it. He was always fun. Rhinox always had the wisdom, and again, ready for self-sacrifice. Kind of almost like the Ratchet of the group. He was the closest thing to a medic, really. Then, of course, you had Tarantulas, who was always scheming and ended up being part of the Cybertron Secret Police. And then, of course, Black Arachnia had a great character arc. Again, being a Predacon for a long time. And, when Silverbolt came around as a Fusor, he kind of won her over to the Maximals. So that was a great story arc, but yet she was still kind of self-serving. So, and then, of course, Cheetor was the kid brother, almost the Bumblebee of the show. Nothing against those characters. And again, I know a lot of people are probably screaming about Black Arachnia. The reason I did not include her, she was so close, is, sometimes the storylines became a little predictable with her, regardless if she was Predacon Maximal. She was always going to do what she wanted to do, and that was it. And, where I felt that these other characters that I included really were just always just a joy to watch. Not that Black Arachnia wasn't. Again, great character. I love all the Beast Wars characters. But for my top 5, I really had to be I had to choose. Something had to set them apart. So, so don't hate on me too much. And again, anyone I didn't name, Rampage, Depth Charge, great characters, Tigatron, Air Razor, all great characters. But, I had to narrow it down. So without further ado, let's get to number 1. So, if you guess correctly, is number 1 Beast Wars Megatron? Yes, it is. So, I went with Beast Wars Megatron as my number 1 pick for Beast Wars characters, because I absolutely think he made a great villain. Look, I understand he has the same name as the classic Decepticon commander, Megatron, who will always be the true leader of the Decepticons. Beast Wars Megatron here stood on his own. He was not a carbon copy of the original Megatron whatsoever, and really had some schemes that were quite interesting. And where he stood apart, the original Megatron was all about really that full frontal assault, go attack this power plant, this resource, that resource, frame the Autobots, Megatron's master plan, bring Cybertron to Earth. Those are all great plans. Megatron here, Beast Wars Megatron, was just so cold and calculating on his own that even his own subjects, his own Predacons, did not always know what the true plan was and what the end game was. What comes to mind, you have the whole story with the golden discs in the agenda. Toward the end of, in that third season, second season leading into the second, actually the agenda again, he goes and figures out they're on prehistoric Earth and says, hey, the Ark's here. What if I just go wipe out the Autobots before they wake up? Then the Maximals won't exist. What a heck of a plan that was. And led to some really interesting stories there. Then, of course, he started off in his classic T-Rex mode, and he even had some comic relief. He's known for having his rubber ducky and his Energon bath. Then he became, Transmetal Megatron, which is my personal favorite incarnation of Beast Wars Megatron. But then he really ups the ante when he becomes Transmetal 2 Megatron. Toward the end of the show, he takes the original Megatron Spark, essentially falls into some lava, and emerges as this great big dragon. And it's made, a couple awesome toys since then. But, in that end battle in Beast Wars, with him being a dragon and he has the Covenant of Primus, it's just almost biblical. The way the villain he becomes, even being a dragon, you look in Revelation. It's just a stellar character. And and again, his voice, when Frank Welker did the original Megatron, he's even said, the guy, probably had some pain about him, something bothering him. So it's a little gravelly, kind of scratchy. Whereas Beast Wars Megatron, David Kaye, really gave him this, that deep, again, kind of charismatic voice that, someone you just really could never trust, no matter what kind of deal you made with him. And for someone who essentially started off transforming into a purple dinosaur, the Barney jokes have always been made out there. He really, again, just really took it and owned it with how they designed the character. And of course, let's not forget the original Beast Wars Megatron was an alligator. Came in a 2-pack with Optimus Primal as a bat, and frankly, even that version of Megatron was awesome. So again, I just, and he had to put up with, again, his fair share of turncoats. He had to deal with Black Arachnia and of course Dinobot, who we just talked about. He had to deal with Ravage coming back. The Tripredacus Council. Black Arachnia, Tarantulas, but yet he was able to keep, his true warriors in check, like Waspinator, Inferno, Quick Strike, Scorponok, Pterosaur. Well, Pterosaur tried to take over as well, but Megatron always stayed in command, just like his namesake did. So again, I feel he very much honored his namesake in the show while still, maintaining his own identity. One thing I even got to say is, we talked about Dinobot right before this. He was evil enough. Megatron was evil enough to resurrect a clone of Dinobot in the form of Transmetal 2 Dinobot that was his lackey. And, you know, they didn't always really go into it that much, but you feel like he did it in part to really toy with the emotions of the Maximals. And of course, you know, Dinobot being Dinobot, again, deserving in that number 2 spot, you know, ended up saving the day and going after Megatron here. And, you know, so again, that's something else, you know, Megatron did that just cold and calculating, charismatic, can never trust the guy no matter how good of a deal he's offering you. Just was a great villain. This is very well written. You know, each incarnation of him was again a treat to watch on screen, and just one of those characters that you know, deserves their own spot out there, and just completely separate again, even from his namesake, but again, so honoring him. All right, so there you have my top 5 Beast Wars characters. And again, this does not include Beast Machines. A lot of the characterizations carried over, a lot didn't. You know, some people like it, some people don't. Beast Wars was better. I'm just going to make this statement. Beast Wars was better than Beast Machines. I watched Beast Machines. I have Beast Machines toys. I love Beast Wars. And that's the anniversary we have this year. Anyways, of course, leave a comment. What are your top 5 Beast Wars characters? Who would you remove from my list? Who would you keep? Again, I know I'm going to get a lot of Black Arachnia fans out there that want to include her. And then, you know, so leave a comment. You know, did I get it completely wrong? Or what are your thoughts? And of course, like this video if you enjoyed going through this ranking, in this little exercise here. And of course, subscribe to the Peach State Prime Transformers channel for more content like this, as well as figure reviews and thoughts on new releases, all that good stuff. And then, of course, you know, I do have my original channel, simply called Peach State Prime, which is all about just all sorts of fun stuff, you know, in and around the Atlanta, Georgia area and beyond, you know, throughout the South, tourist attractions, fun places to eat and shop, special events, including conventions. All that's over on that channel, so feel free to check that out. But anyways, thank you very much for watching this episode. Hope you have a great day, and God bless.